Okay, so last video of chapter 1, we're finally done with it. Well, we're going to take a look here. We're going to eventually revisit the idea of simplifying expressions. But before we do that, I'm going to add a little nuance. We're going to talk about taking the opposite of a sum or a difference. So again, when we talk about an opposite, we're putting a negative in front of an item. So for an example, if we're taking the opposite of a sum, then I'm basically taking the opposite of sum addition problem. If we're taking the opposite of a difference, then I'm taking the opposite of some difference. And I just created those. You can use whatever difference you want. Now, to figure out what happens when we have the opposite of a sum, right, there's two schools of thought. One is to use our order of ops. All right, so if we use order of operations, I do what's inside the parentheses first. 3 plus 4 is 7. And so basically the result of this is negative 7. Okay? Again, that seems pretty easy, pretty clear, but I want you guys to take a look where we're heading with this, right? These are not like terms, so combining them isn't an option. So we better figure out what's really going on here. Another way to think about this is to think in terms of distribution, right? Basically what we have here is we're going to distribute this opposite. And so when I do that, I get the opposite of 3, negative 3, plus the opposite of 4. All right, of course, as we can see, negative 3 plus negative 4 results in negative 7. But I want to rewrite this one more time, right? Because when I add a negative, that's the same thing as just subtracting. All right, and what I want you guys to notice is take a look, right? Without the opposite, 3 plus 4, everything's nice and positive here. But because of the opposite being applied to the sum, everything changes sign. So the 3, right, changed to a negative 3, and the addition changed to a subtraction. And we still get the result of negative 7. So the idea basically is we're distributing the negative, changing all the signs behind it. So essentially, when you do this, it changes signs. And that should be no surprise because that's what an opposite does. Remember back in the day, an opposite, same absolute value, but different sign. So that's what's going on. What happens when we do a difference? Well, again, if we use the order of operations, right, we do what's inside here first. So 5 take away 2 is 3, and then we take its opposite. So the answer is negative 3. But looking deeper, if we think of this as distribution, when I distribute that opposite, I get the opposite of 5. We are subtracting, right? And now I have to take the opposite of 2. All right, so that opposite is applied to the 5, that opposite is applied to the 2, and that minus sign, we haven't done anything because we just distributed across the minus. And if we clean this up, right, subtraction of a negative is adding the opposite, and again, you can see that we get negative 3 yet again. So it tells us our math is good. But more importantly, notice what happened to the difference. The 5 was positive, and we were subtracting 2. All right, but when we distributed the negative, the 5 became its opposite, and the subtraction became a positive. So again, all my signs changed. So when we take the opposite of a sum, or we take the opposite of a difference, when you distribute it out, all the signs essentially change. And that's going to be important for the next round. When we look at number 1 and we're asked to simplify, eventually I want to combine like terms, right? Here's a term with x in it, and there's a term with x in it. There's a term without x, and there's a term without x. So I eventually want to combine them. But before I can do that, the order of operations say to work with the parentheses first. Okay, I am, but nothing going on inside. As a matter of fact, I can't even perform the addition because they're not like. But I am, right, taking the subtraction, right, of a sum. And let me just go ahead and go one more route here. This is plus negative 2, and this is plus negative 3x plus 4. All right, so I think you guys will get pretty good at showing this later, but I just wanted to use the idea that subtraction is the addition of an opposite, so you can see that we're taking the opposite of a sum. Of course, what we learn about the opposite of a sum, it essentially changes all the signs. So that step I'm showing right now to be clear with the work that we've done, but effectively what we're doing is just distributing that minus sign. And when we take the opposite of it, right, basically all the signs change. So what used to be a positive 3x is now a minus 3x. What used to be a plus 4 is now a minus 4. Sign change. And now we can basically combine like terms. we have 7x minus 3x and a plus negative 2 minus 4. There's a 4x, and I think on the back end here we get a negative 6, or if you want you can write that as 4x minus 6. Again, this last part is negative 2 plus negative 4. Okay, so subtraction, the opposite of a sum, we basically change the signs. Same thing over here, we have a distribution here, so 2 times 3 is 6x, and then plus 2 times 1 is 2. And then we're just going to, rather than doing all this work, where this minus sign gets distributed, right? Because we're going to basically add the opposite. And so when I do that, right, I get a sign change. So what used to be positive is now minus. What used to be minus changes to a plus. We're changing the signs behind it. And then we're basically combining like terms. Let me move some things around. Right? These two terms, when I combine them, give us 2x. Those two terms, when I combine them, give us plus 7. And so now we're on our way to simplifying expressions using the concept of distribution, using the concept of oppositeness, using the concept of pretty much PEMDAS, if you would, because we're working with parentheses first by doing the distribution and then combining like terms. So that pretty much wraps up chapter 1. That's our last item. We're now ready to solve equations. Again, I invite you, if there's anything you have questions about, please hit me up with an email. Ask for a virtual office hour if you need it. Go on to Canvas, earn some points, and pose your questions there and your thoughts. I'm pretty sure someone will be there to help you. All right, very well done. That wraps up chapter 1. Onward and upward to chapter 2. I'll see you guys in those modules.